Hello, everybody. Welcome to DrZero Show. We directly join to Liverpool, Luna Muñoz. Hello, Luna. How are you?
I'm good, Dr. Zero. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Thank you very much for joining. Our topic today is a bit interesting topic. For some people, it might be a bit sensitive. We will talk about the life after academia, but I want to start with what were you doing in academia?
I studied psychology. I did my PhD in New Orleans in the US. And while I was there, somebody in Sweden came to a conference that I was at and said, "Would you like to come to Sweden, do a postdoc?" So I went to Sweden. I just felt like after my PhD, I could have chosen something that was a postdoc, or I could have chosen to work in industry. And I was offered both jobs, and I was kind of humming about it. And then somebody said, "Well, if you leave academia now, you might not be able to go back, and you'd be burning those bridges, and you'd be closing off a whole door." And so I said, "Okay, I'll go to do my postdoc in Sweden." So I did that. And then, of course, after your postdoc, what do? You go and get your assistant professorship. So I then applied to all over the world, and I got an offer for a lecturer, which is the same thing as assistant professor in England. And because there wasn't a tenure system, I thought I'll try to go to England and see if that's better than the US tenure, because I'd already tried to do my PhD at Penn State and my professor did not get tenure. So I had been a victim of the tenure system before. So I came to England. I went from lecturer, moved to another university. As we've said, you move where the jobs are. That's what people told me. You don't get to choose where you want to live. So I moved from the northwest of England to the northeast of England to get promoted. And then from the northeast back to the northwest, because they promised me a promotion. Didn't happen. And then
It is too easy to promise, like empty promises.
What's in the box? What's in the box? And then you get there and you're like, oh, it's the same crap in the box.
Yes, please continue.
No, so then I thought that I really wanted to get to professor. I really wanted a full professorship. I wanted a chair, and it didn't happen. So yeah, that's when I decided I've tried to climb enough, and it's not possible for me to. There's a glass ceiling, right? A lot of people talk about the glass ceiling that happens, and sometimes it feels harder than glass.
Yes. Like I was about to ask you if there is a life after academia, but you changed my mind. My question is there a life in academia? So the way you describe, you were just moving.
There's a carving. You try to carve a life while you're in academia, don't you? But you know what? Because I was not always, well, I knew that I wanted to be in academia, but in between doing my PhD, I moved out to California. So I lived in New York, and then I drove to California. Big long trip, really fun. But I worked for Warner Brother Records. So I had like a real job, right, in entertainment.
Sorry, what do you mean with real jobs? Come on. So do you mean that academic jobs are not real jobs? What do you mean with real jobs?
Some people say that though. They're like, "Have you been in the real world?" I don't know. It all feels.
But isn't it, because I really want to talk about that, isn't it not fair to share, have you ever been to real world? Because academic job is you do project management, you work with people, you run international projects, you deliver reports, you deliver projects like products, services even. So it is interesting when people ask like this. What do they think? What type of perception they have about academia? As if just you read and do nothing else?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share with you. I did an industry interview, and he said to me, "Well, I just want you to know that this job in not for profit, in a voluntary sector, we work a lot of hours. And I know you're not used to that in academia, like working a lot of hours. We might work like 40, 50 hours a week." And I'm like, okay, that's actually better than the 80 hours that some of us could work. I don't know. I probably didn't work 80 hours, but I definitely worked close to 60 hours some weeks, you know? So it was interesting the perception of academia as being, yeah, you just don't work that many hours. You have summers off. You know what I mean? There's definitely that perception. And this was somebody who even works with academics. They have board of trustees with academics on it. So I was really surprised by that. So yeah, there will be that perception while you're leaving that people will think it's not a real job, or that you have summers off and it's quite easy and cushy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So again, is there a life in academia?
Is there a life in academia? I wanted my job to be my life. I said that. It was like 1997, and I was applying for PhD programs, and somebody said to me, "You're going to work a lot of hours doing your PhD and going into academia." And I said, "No, but I want my job to be my life. I want to give my life to academia." So yeah, I think there is a life in academia, in that you can make academia your whole entire life. And I think that's what I did for a long time. And I guess maybe I needed to go through that. I don't really begrudge that. And I think a lot of people get stuck because they think, I've already put this much time in. I've already put this much effort in. There's so much sunk costs, that people feel like, well, I have to stay now because I've already invested so much. But I didn't really see it that way. I saw it as, I needed to go through that. I needed to see what that felt like. And I needed to put in the contribution that I wanted to put in. But at the end of the day, my priorities changed. And at that point, I realized I need to make a change because my priorities have changed. So I need to invest in something else because this is no longer working for me. It's like taking a board meeting, right? Instead of like going to another departmental meeting, you need to just have a departmental meeting with yourself and be like, okay, how's this working out for us? Are we still enjoying this, or is this becoming for me, I felt like it was becoming more exploitative. I felt like I was being given messages that I didn't feel comfortable doing.
So you left academia, but then, so let's come to that one. Is there a life after academia? Then I will talk about your life after academia.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I started to carve some time out of academia. So my friend asked me, "What are you doing for yourself? Like, what do you really want to do? What was your big passion when you were in California or you were in Sweden?" Sweden has like a big swing dancing scene, and I really wanted to do the swing dancing while I was in Sweden. Never did it because I thought I had to have a partner, and so there's always something that I was making up, like, I don't have time, I'm always at work, or there was always an excuse. And she said to me, all right, enough excuses, just go to do some dancing. And I think that changed my life about what I thought academia could be like. And I started to carve out more time and doing more swing dancing weekends and doing retreats and things like this, but still doing the work for academia, but just being more boundaried, I guess. You know what I mean? Like having those boundaries in place. And that opened my eyes, because then I started meeting people outside of academia and being like, "Oh, you do that. Okay. Oh, you have boundaries at your work. Oh, you do intellectually challenging work." Right? I didn't think that there was so much available outside. Once I started to make contacts with people, I was like, there's a whole new world.
I didn't know that you could sing so nice. You have a great voice. Maybe we should get a couple of songs from you. So you see, did you go to singing courses also? What did you do?
My friend was doing singing courses at the same time. She was teaching me some of the things.
I got you, isn't it? I got you. So I hope you will not start and dance right now also. It will just to show how many skill sets you have gained after the academia.
Exactly. And even when I was going to swing dancing, there were so many people who were interested in the technical things about swing music and about, there's 8 beats. So, and then there's 8 by 4 is 32. And I was like, whoa, there's nerdy things to be had outside of academia. I love that there's all these nerds around. And I think, I think that's when I started to my brain would sometimes leave academia a little bit, daydream. And I think daydreaming is huge. Rest, daydreaming, because it gives you a path that you can imagine. Even if you don't know how it's exactly going to work, at least you can imagine it. And that's the first part of, like liberation. Do you know what I mean? Is imagining freedom.
Sorry, but you talk as if academicians, people are capturing the prisons with the chains. But I really want to talk about that. You talk that like the boundaries. Can you elaborate on it? Because there is this, especially some professors in some countries, they act as if that PhD candidates or young scholars, they shouldn't have any life outside of academia, and all the time they have to devote their life if they want to get something as an output. And also this publish or perish mentality. Like, can you elaborate on these boundaries? Just to parenthesis to our audience, we did not rehearse this question, so she didn't know what I would ask. But you are opening conversation. Very nice.
Yeah, the boundaries. I mean, when I first started my PhD, there was very little boundaries. So I remember being told, I was kind of like an apprentice. I'd need to devote as many hours as possible to learning a skill. And that culture then got ingrained in me. And I put so much time and effort into, my job. And I think I'm glad that I did that the first PhD program fell through because they did a restructuring, and then my professor didn't get tenure because I went to New Orleans, and New Orleans is a party city. So the PhD program did have some partying in it, and it really showed me that even the professors were quite boundaried in the way that they worked. They worked really hard, but we still had crawfish boils, and obviously we were then socializing with professors, which is a bit okay. Are we having a life outside? But that showed me a little bit about like having boundaries, about people who were putting those boundaries in. And then I think also, yes, that publisher perish, and you are the property of, when I was doing my postdoc, I definitely felt, I think I told you this earlier, that I felt like I couldn't come up with my own projects. I felt like I needed to do whatever they were telling me to do. And it was very much like, you need to do this many papers a year, or, all the other postdocs are doing that. And then you get this competitiveness. So I think that wears down your boundaries, as well as that you feel like you're not good enough. So there's a lot of worth tied to those publications, right? You get huge accolades and validation as a human when you produce papers that are 3-4 star.
Papers that nobody reads.
I know. What is the 4 star? Nobody's reading them. They're behind so many paywalls. I had one paper that was in the highest impact, of all time. And I'd get people begging me for a copy of it because no libraries could afford to have it in their subscriptions.
We should have another discussion about that, this open science. Actually, related to this question, we have a question, live question right now. Maybe I think you are able to see. Is there any life in the industry? Cross question. What do you think?
Oh, amazing. That's great. Yes. Yeah, life in industry. Well, what I decided to do was I applied to jobs in education, charitable sectors, education, government sectors, research director positions, think tanks, public policy. Those were all the jobs I then went and applied for. And it took a long time to translate my skills, obviously. But what I saw from doing the interviews with those industry was, because they were all not-for-profits, right? So they were the voluntary sector. They have, diminishing funds from the government under the, life,
Pressure.
this. So it's working really hard, right? And I could see I would ask questions about work-life balance, and I think that's where you start to get an idea of I don't need to take well, some people do, but I felt like I don't need to take the first job. And I think that's where a lot of people I one of the things I say is to pause, just pause and think about what is your new imagining of a life and have some negotiables and some non-negotiables. Do you know what I mean? So, like, I knew I didn't want to go to London because it's a 2-hour train ride. And that's way too much for me. If it's 1 day a week or like 1 day a month, okay, maybe. If it's 80,000 pounds, okay. If it's a lot of money,
If
cool. So, but I had those things in place, right? Like these are the things that I want out of the job. And I want somebody who's really going to care about, equality, diversity, and inclusion. So some of the questions that I asked in the interview were about, carefully selected, but I'd ask questions that would give me a clue on whether they were going to be good places for me to work. And I think that's just taking your empowerment back, right? So I think there is life in the industry if you go in there knowing your worth and you go in empowered, then you are making obviously you have to give something to them, but you're going to be valuable in so many industries. Once I realized the number of skills that I had, I'm like, they would be lucky to have me. Now I need to find a place where I'm gonna be happy.
yes, it is actually the skill set that you gain in the academy is much, too many tools and methodologies that we gain. Since we are in this aquarium, we just assume that everybody has the same skill set. When you go to outside of this aquarium, you just say, "Wow, people don't know the thing that researchers know, isn't it?"
Exactly, yeah, like the aquarium, it's like, yeah, you're in this bubble, everybody around you has the same skills, especially things like I've been reading about the future skills for industry, and they're all things that academics have. Problem solving, analytical thinking, creativity, empathy, well, maybe some academics
Ro-
don't.
Maybe we may not have it, but the first three at least are not replicable by robots.
No. They are sustainable skills that will take you to any industry that you want to go to. This is why it's difficult when people come to me and say, I have a PhD in philosophy. What job can I get in industry? It's like the world's your oyster. And that can feel really liberating, but it can be scary, right? Because you want to kind of feel contained. It's safe to be contained. And I think that gets people scared to leave
You're right.
um, academia as well.
Thank you for live question, Shubham Dalai. So now you also touched upon, but I want to talk about your life after academia. Now I see your post. You have a consultancy firm. You are helping people who are recovering from academia. I assume, considering the number of limited resources and positions available, you might have many clients who are trying to survive outside of academia. Am I
Yes.
right? Or
Yes, I have hundreds. There's hundreds, if not thousands. Yeah, so I mean, one of the big things that I did in academia was to help a lot of early career researchers. And I did a lot of coaching while I was in academia. I did a lot of mentoring while I was in academia. And I didn't realize that that would then serve me well when I left academia, is to then still continue to do those things. But the thing that I really cared about in academia was helping those people that were early career who didn't have the kind of like historical background or family background where they knew how to get ahead. So I'd help them to understand the kind of like politics and culture within academia and figure out a way that was perfect for them. And now it's my same passion. I want to help people leave academia. And a lot of them don't have the information or the, kind of like network or fallback positions within their families or networks. And
did
I want
I?
to,
Sorry, Luna, did I
yeah.
misheard? Did you say you want to help people to leave the academia, or did you want to help people who are leaving academia? Which one is it?
Leave they can leave. Although I had one client who came into my world and got her boundaries all set up, knew exactly what she wanted, where her priorities were, what her values were, and she went into academia with her eyes open, right? Like, I want one of the first like thoughts that I have to call my coaching business was eyes wide open or something like this, because I want people to have the knowledge, right? And what you were talking about, open science, I want open, transparent ways of imparting information to people. So that's part of it. And that's why I built this coaching business. And what's great is that, like, I should probably plug a masterclass on Friday night, and another one in December and another one in January. So if anybody wants to do them, but they're
Yeah,
free.
please talk about this masterclass. I mean, you have
Okay.
right to promote what you do. Definitely.
So I have 4 different dates for these master classes. So you can choose your date and time that you want to come. And it's transition from academia without burning out, because I am so about taking things intentionally, with conscious effort, rather than, again, floating like we did in academia, and going like, well, you should do this and you should do that, and then you should do a postdoc, then you should. No more shoulds. We operate with intention from now on, and rest and taking a pause. So that's what my masterclass is about. But it's also going to tell you about, the 3 biggest jobs that you can do right now without any further training, without any other qualifications. I'll share those. I'll share more stories about the industry jobs that I applied to. But yeah, so I built the coaching business. So I've got that masterclass, and then I've just opened up a new business, which is consultancy. And it's helping nonprofit organizations to find funding streams. And then we apply for the funding for them, write the funding applications, write grants for them. But we also play matchmaker and do like the blue sky. What we were talking about, the analytical and problem solving. A lot of people come to me who are, charitable organizations and say, I provide this. And I'm like, well, if you paired up with this other company, you could go for £200,000, grants at that point, rather than your little 2,500, because we want like a legacy, we need these. Voluntary sectors are no longer voluntary. They're essential in this, climate. So I help them to create that legacy that they want to create. So that's the other. So I kind of live the coaching that I started to do, because I wanted people to pivot with that intentionality and purpose and mission. And now I'm creating my mission. Do you know what I mean? I'm seeing it
By
happen.
pivoting, you saw an opportunity. But if I understood correctly, you not only help people that are outside of academia, you are also helping people in the academia to set up their boundaries and to intentional actions so that
Mm.
they can decide what they are going to do in the future, isn't it? So, so, but you also teach about pivoting. Can you elaborate on what do you mean with pivot?
Yes. So it could be a lot of different pivoting, right? So, I mean, I pivoted from different industries. I've also pivoted away in a way, like going from New Orleans to Sweden. That was like freaking like such a hard cultural shock. But pivoting in the way that I use it is you're making either a change to a new way of living, or you're making a change to a new industry. Like you're leaving academia and you're pivoting into industry. You're kind of doing a 90-degree or, a 45-degree, and you're moving into something else. Because really, a lot of the things that you do in academia, like some of the things I'm doing now, right, is the grant writing for not-for-profits. I did that while I was in academia. So in some ways, have I really left academia? Probably not, because I'm still doing that, and I would still create collaborations with people in academia to say, hey, we need a music psychologist to do some evaluation for us for this not-for-profit, which would then help with the grant funding, right? So, I still have all the friends, maybe not the deans who were, kind of jerks, but, all the other people. I loved my colleagues, so I still have friends there. So I think, you can make your own kind of way. You could still do, teaching in academia, I've been invited to give talks on some of the peer mentoring that I developed. So, there's that as well, or giving decolonization of curricula, because that's some of the things I did in academia as well. But I think I've allowed for opportunities by building my network outside of academia. So for a while, I was getting advice from people who were in academia. So professors, I was like, so what should I do outside of academia? Oh, well, you should do something where you need a PhD, because otherwise, if you ever want to go back to academia, if you're not doing PhD level work, you're not going to go back. So I was listening to them, but I really just had to get out and start talking to other people who were in these not-for-profits or other
In the
industries
real world, you mean?
in the real world with their real jobs.
But there is one thing I really want to, because if you don't want, you don't respond. But it is not easy transition, isn't it? Like now when we talk, you make jokes about it. Maybe after some time, it is easy to talk about the past. But during that period, wasn't it painful when you noticed that, or when you have to make decision, or when you made decision that, okay, it seems I cannot stay in the academia.
Yeah. In 2018, 2019 was when I started thinking about leaving. I hired a therapist and talked to her about leaving. And she said, what are your values that would direct you, that'll show you the way? And I had no idea. Like I had lost a vision of myself. I'd lost who I was, I didn't know what my values were. She said, what are your biggest priorities? I said, becoming a professor. Like I really had no clue how to answer that. And then 2020 came and I had to up my game. We all had to. I had to move everything online. I learned how to use OBS Studio to record all my lectures. It now helps me with like live streaming now. But at the
Yes.
time, I was using it for my lectures. I was, getting on Zoom with all my students. I was still creating all the decolonizing work and creating an anti-racism statement for my university. They were telling me to apply for grants. I was going for 1 millions, like here and there. I was taking no holidays. I would take holidays, but I'd work the holidays. I did so much investment in the university. And then in 2021, they decided to restructure. And
Restructure, isn't it?
the point? What's the point? It's just somebody new comes in and says, "Oh no, I want to, all this. Like, just change it, right?" And then, so in that restructuring, I was on the redundancy list. And I could not believe it was such like a slap in the face to me. I felt my world crumble. And when I felt my world crumble, when somebody does something like that to me, I go with like revenge, I guess, a sort of. So I was in the union and I was a representative in the union. I was doing all the equality, diversity work in the union as well. And I just went full throttle. I got everybody who was on that redundancy list. We got all together. We formed a network. We were going, I was usually the voice of those 47 individuals. And I would go on the picket lines and start speaking and crying. And people would just throw money at our strike fund. And I did so much fundraising that I didn't even realize that it was fundraising, but I developed so many skills. I had to learn employment law, right? Because I had to learn what they were doing that was breaking employment law. All these things that I then had to learn then served me, because then when I had to go for jobs that were about public policy, educational policy, I knew all of that because I'd just done it. And I think it's really important to realize
You learn because you had to cure your own problems. But wasn't it
my
also
own
to be able
complaint,
to
my
ask
own.
your,
Yes.
to be able to tell these things to people and raise money? Like it is like sales. You did actually sales.
Yeah.
Please
I never
continue.
really thought of it. I never thought of that. Yeah, I did. I did. I started the first time I went out there, it was, it was just chaos. And then I started to have like, okay, I want calls to action at the end of this. Do you know what I mean? I was taking all the skills I'd done in public engagement as well, because I'd done a lot of like pint of science, where you talk about science in a pub and things like that. And I took all these things that I learned from there. I don't think I realized it, but I just put it into practice. And then I got scientists from all over the world, and we held a webinar on open science and how what they had done in terms of the redundancy was against open science and against the Leiden and all this different Dora principles and all that kind of stuff. So I learned all these different things. And but I burnt myself out. I burnt myself out doing all that because I felt like it was another pandemic. Remember when the pandemic started? We
Yeah.
all like, we can do it. We can do it. I'm going to do exercise classes at night. I'm going to put everything online. I'm going to put bells and whistles on all of it. I can
But
do it.
actually, I think academicians were not appreciated enough.
Mm-mm.
We, like academicians, were able to, in one click, with couple of buttons, became digital. Like imagine there was not enough education training were provided as far as I know, but all lectures became digital, all meetings became hybrid, and then academia became the one, lecturers became the one engine of this digital transformation. You know that people were making jokes about the primary reason for digital transformation is COVID, nothing else, no competition, no infrastructure, it is COVID. So don't, but you are talking about
Yeah.
that period.
Yeah, yeah. So I did the same thing during this next stressful thing, right? During the redundancy, I just upped my game and I burnt out, and I had to take a
Oh,
month off of work because I was so stressed, depressed, everything, piled onto it. It was just a bunch of mental health problems, and I was signed off of work, and I think that was helpful because I needed some time just to myself to reflect. And it's something that a lot of academics say has been helpful as they've been thinking about leaving, is just taking time off for their mental health and then resetting, right? And like I talked about a rebirth earlier, and I do think it's a rebirth. I think there is like a rebirth. You're becoming you realize who you are when you take a rest, right? You can actually have a moment to reflect on who you are and what's important to you when you just like disconnect yourself from all of that. So yeah, that it was really, really hard. And after I left, I had a pain in the neck. It's kind of funny because it was a pain in the neck to be in academia, but it turned
Of,
physical.
of course, all these psychological things brings physical
Yeah.
unwanted outcomes.
Mm. Yes. So I had a pain in my neck for 6 months. I should have gone to the doctor, but I'm American and grew up in poverty, so I'm like, "Nah, I can do it on my own. It's fine."
In
And
Europe,
it's not.
you have rights to go to hospital. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
In England, yes, we do. But yeah, it was so there was healing from that as well, and that's why I should have chosen a little bit better, but I did back off on some of the industry applications during that time because I realized I just need to take care of myself. And I ended up doing some freelance work for education where, I only had like 20 hours a month doing freelance work. And that helped a great deal. And that's actually how my consultancy business came into fruition. I met somebody there just doing some freelance work. I'm only being paid 15 pounds an hour, super, super small amount of money, but it was meaningful. I loved the work. I loved talking to teachers and talking to them about what they could, how they could decolonize the science curricula. And I met the director of operations, and she said, I think I'm leaving this job. And I said, my contract's about to run out. And we decided to pair up. And it's incredible. There's so many serendipitous moments that I wrote on LinkedIn today because I realize how much what I'm doing has just been, I met this person through, I don't know, walking in the park or, and talking about our businesses. And then they said, oh, wow, I know this other person, and even when I was talking to a potential client the other day, she said the reason why she got her consultancy side gig was her sister knew somebody in their church and she introduced them. It's not networking. Do you know what I mean? It's it's just meeting people.
Yes, some instances like our connection also became. I think we commented each other's posts, and then
Yeah,
it was academic misfits discussion. Like
yeah,
it wasn't like networking per se. It
yeah.
was just sharing experiences, and then uh, and I like your posts and the content you create. So wow, she's really insightful. She knows what she's doing. I should interview her. I hope she will be kind to accept, and I don't need to pay her. I am getting free consultancy right now.
No, I enjoy this. I love talking to people and I love meeting people. It's like my favorite thing. And I love that I can do that. Whereas in academia, a lot of times people would say to me, yeah, but who are you working with? Are they going to be like fruitful in terms of like, where's the grant income? And are you going to be PI? And so you always have to have these awkward conversations with people about like, well, I need to be the lead on this, or I need, and it's like, I just want to do cool things with cool people.
No, but I think this session there are too many topics that I want to discuss with you later on. We should do more recording, decolonization, and actually what you should do in the academia in to have the boundaries. Like I think it is going to be uh, more topics. It opened more venues for me to discuss with you. We have another question from the same person from Shapam. But you see, when you have this type of lectures, my audience also was a beautiful red hat, Luna. I
You know,
think,
it's pivoting your job as easily as changing hats.
wow. So what is your suggestion to PhD candidates? What
3-point
can they
advice.
do so that their experience is better than industry? And also maybe I don't want to respond it because it is you should respond it, but maybe they should also consider that they may not stay in the academia.
Mm,
So,
yes.
but three advices that you would give.
Yeah. 3 points that makes academia better than the industry. Okay, and 3-point advice for PhDs. I think going into my PhD, I wish that I had had those boundaries. And I did find them about halfway through my PhD. And I was doing more like yoga, meditation, whatever it is that lights you up and makes you feel inspired. It makes you feel like you're in a state of flow. It could be, sports, it could be playing video games, it could be reading. For me, I like crocheting sometimes. I think finding those and putting them in in the UK we say diary or in your calendar, and making sure that those don't are as important and unmovable as your meetings with your supervisors, I think is a like number one tip. You put them in, like I had yoga in there, and when somebody said to me, can you meet Thursday at 4 p.m., I was like, oh no, I'm sorry, I have something already, taking that spot. I can't move it. Like those are the things, like saying no. Basically, essentially it's saying no, for your own well-being.
But it might be hard to say no to your supervisor.
Come on, it's 1 hour. 1 hour a week. No,
Okay.
no. I
I
mean,
advise one, say no.
yeah, say no. Practice saying no. It can be small. Not like a huge no, but like, little small no's. Just to have that kind of feel what it feels like to put yourself first. Number 2, I would say keep some friends or colleagues or whatever you call them, your team, your advocates outside of academia. I felt like I had all of my friends and network in academia, and I think that I should have had some network and keep them up outside of academia, which is easier with social media, right? Like when I was doing my PhD, we didn't have Facebook. So, it should be a little bit easier to keep those networks, but keep those going, at the same time. And number 3, write down and have a board meeting or a committee meeting with yourself, about what your mission is, because there's probably a reason why you started your PhD. And I felt like I had lost sight of why I started my PhD, which made me so lost about where my values were later on, because I was getting caught up in the metrics, right? How many citations do I have? How many, it was all about counting stuff, and there was nothing about the quality. It was all quantity. And I think start to every half a year, put something in your calendar where it reminds you, oh, I should think about whether I'm still on the right track, right? I came here to do such and such. Am I still on that track? And why have I veered off? Is it an intentional thing? Have I actually, changed my mind, which is cool? Or am I just following other people's dreams and my dream has gotten lost in it? And just having that little moment of like, is this what I want? Is just useful. You might not change it. You might not be able to change it, but at least you know who you are.
To be honest, when I listened, I was just going in deep thoughts and thinking, okay, why I didn't meet you when I did my PhD? But it is never late, isn't it? Like, thank you for all these advices. I really appreciate you joining to DrZero Show from Liverpool. I hope and I believe you enjoyed this conversation the way that I enjoyed, and you will be my guest again in near future soon. Actually,
It's
thank
fun.
you very much for this fantastic conversation and your advices, your insights. I believe you will have again. Could we repeat that you will have master classes? So they need to pay to join.
Free
Okay,
master
no,
classes. There's
just
four master classes, all free. I have 100 slides, so much valuable information about how to pivot, exactly the steps that I took, and I think it's 3 or 4 job areas that I considered. And I did do research, and I'm sharing all the research that I did on, these different job areas that I considered. So it's packed full, all free. I'm probably going to give away a book at one of them because I like giving away stuff. And I've been reading some new books that I think would be really helpful for people. Things about compassion, things about rest, things about, writing resumes, like things like that I've discovered that I'm like, ooh, people need one of those. So I really like giving away those things. So yeah, they're free. They're on my website. I'm at lunaleadership.com/masterclass, or I'm going to do a double streaming like you are. So I'm going to stream onto my website as well. So /events is where the live stream will happen on my website. Because some people said they don't want to join a Facebook group, and I totally understand that. And I'm all about like burning down the hellfire that is some of the social media.
yeah, but we can put as a comment under this video on
Perfect.
LinkedIn, on YouTube also. That will be wonderful.
Yes.
I believe I will join also because I really like the way that you describe all this stuff, and I recommend everybody also join. Thank you very much again. Have a nice day and good evening to Liverpool. See you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Zero. Bye, everybody.